Today I would like to share my 5 favorite no or low cost junk journal supplies. This is part of Meg's International Yearly Junk Journal July collaboration. Welcome, it's Barbara from Vienna, Austria. Most of us junk journalers love hoarding supplies and also buying lots of new shiny things that we hope will motivate us to keep playing in our beautiful junk journals. I'm certainly guilty of this myself. When I read that Meg decided on the topic of favorite supplies for this collaboration, my first thoughts were things like distress oxides and gold paint and things like that. But when I went through some of my favorite junk journals, I noticed that the supplies I enjoy most is either at no extra cost or very low cost to me. So let me show you some examples from these journals. So my first favorite no or low cost supplies is hand-drawn images. Let me show you some examples in the biggest journal I've ever made, which was the journal I made using all the wonderful ephemera I made in last December, so the Daily December collaboration I had with Louisa Heinzel. I will link that playlist, which includes a complete flip through of this journal for you below in case you want to have a look at it. So here's a pocket on a vintage book page where I added some gesso and some coffee splatters and some distress oxide. And then I drew this image of a bird in pencil. In the pocket, I have one of my digitals, which is also from a hand-drawn image that I placed on top of a vintage envelope. On this page, we have a hand-drawn image of a plant. That was just a very quick sketch, and I don't know, there's something about it that I like. Here's another one of those bird images. Again, this is a pocket, but it has nothing in it. This is done in the same way, and also these are actually available as digitals in my shop. But I would really like to encourage you to try your own drawings because, of course, if they're your own, they have a lot more meaning to you in your journal. Here's another hand-drawn image of another flower that I also really like, although as you can see, I'm not great with sketches. I don't have the practice, but when I do them and I have them in my journals, they make me so happy. In this middle of one of the signatures, I have 2 real vintage envelopes, and inside one of these, I have another printable, which is a scan of a book page. Again, it's not a masterpiece, but it's mine. Here's the third image of those birds. He's a chubby little one and I really like him. And this is the fourth one, which I made into a tuck spot. Here's another bird. I think this is a red cardinal that I tried in a little more detail. He's not great, but he's okay. As I said, he's mine, and he also is on top of a little pocket. And then we have another one of these images on the envelope, which is just the sketched butterfly. Next, we have this little journal, which is one of my absolute favorites. It's made out of a paper bag. Again, I will link the video for this for you below in case you want to see the flip through. Here's a hand-drawn butterfly. This is the original drawing. Very simple on a very simple background. This is my planner that I made from scratch. Again, I will show the video of how I made this planner, this cover. And in here I have quite a few hand-drawn images. For example, one would be this flower here. Super simple flower, but really cute if you put it in a cluster like this. There's some lace underneath, some black thread, and that just makes a really cute cluster. Here I tried my hand at drawing a bear. He turned into an angry bear for some reason. Maybe I had some underlying issues, I don't know. But he makes me smile. In this belly band, I have a little girl that I drew from a tutorial by Art with Flow. As you can see, she's a little manga girl, and I drew her on my iPad in Procreate. So that's another option if you have a tablet or something like that. This is another one I drew with my tablet, which is this beautiful moth. This was a tutorial by Genevieve's Designs. This is a mandala that I hand drew and painted with, I think these were water-soluble crayons. So this was drawn on paper, and these two were drawn again with Procreate. I'm just obsessed with mandalas. Here's another hand-drawn mandala. This one I think is on a digital that I'm happy to link for you below. This little journaling card has, again, another mandala. This is hand-drawn in one of my journals. Again, this is part of a digital that is available for you if you don't want to draw your own. Another one of those from the same sheet from my previous journal. This one is an original that I've drawn on this book page. This here is another mandala, which is on that digital sheet, which was from an old journal. I made this into a tuck spot. I have some more examples of hand-drawn images here in Nadia's beautiful journal. I also have a video of the unboxing of this. This is a journal I bought. And I also have a playlist of all the pages that I made in here for you. And it's all linked below this video. Here, hand-drawn fish on a pocket. Another hand-drawn plant on a vintage dictionary page. Here is a Zentangle underneath this collage. Very fun background. Some more doodling on this one. This is another mandala. I designed and colored this on a watercolor paper, cut it out and added this in here as a fun element and then journaled around it. There is a video where I show you exactly how I made this and in general how to go about making mandalas, which is in that playlist of this journal, which is part of my junk journal snacks. So check that out if you want to see how to make these mandalas. This is a mandala I don't love as much, but I still think it's a nice element in a junk journal. I drew that directly on here and just colored it with a black fine liner. One of my favorite pages, a very recent one, My Tree of Life, inspired by Gustav Klimt. I have a digital, which is from my boho birds, which had this dream catcher, and I made a hole in it, but more importantly, I drew some more feathers to extend the dream catcher. So the printable was only until here, and I just hand drew these feathers with colored pencils to just expand it. Super fun. Some super easy flowers. So if you are looking for more inspiration of what you can create in your own junk journals, maybe this series is helpful. I post these videos every Sunday, 7 p.m. Central European time, and they're always under 20 minutes. And they are there to inspire you to have fun in your own journals. Lastly, I can show you some examples from one of my newest journals. This is a tiny one. This is one I made mostly in a recent art journaling retreat. I will link this video with this journal, or there's actually 3 videos below for you. These are not hand-drawn. These are from one of my digitals, but there are some hand-drawn elements in here. Again, we have one of my birds. This time you see it here looking a bit differently because this whole journal has a very colorful and fun art journal-y vibe in it. And here I paired it with bold colors, which I really enjoy. And here's that other little bird again that you've seen. This time he's in a different setting as well. So they are quite versatile. You just draw it once. Maybe you have a chance to make a copy or to scan it and then to use it in multiple journals. Favorite junk journal supplies number 2, and these are not necessarily in the order. I love them all equally, I think. Number 2 would be hand-carved stamps. So another video I want to link for you below this video is the one where I show you how I make my hand-carved tree stamps, which you will see in these journals. So let me show you a few examples of those. So let's stay in this little journal to start off. So here we have one of my tree stamps in a bright neon orange. In this case, it looks very modern. Here we have that same tree stamp with some stitching. Moving back into this little nature journal, here we have another one of my tree stamps on the left. Here we have stamps on both pages. So once we have this fun flower with a quote, and once we have this bird here that I stamped on some cheesecloth. So that's another fun way to add stamps. They don't have to be stamped on paper. Here we have 2 sets of stamps on one page. So this is one of my tree stamps on some eco-dyed paper. And this is another foam stamp with just some rectangles, just as another fun element of interest. I have a few examples in Nadia's journal as well. Here's again a tree stamp, simply stamped on some beautiful sprayed paper, paired with some wallpaper in the background and a quote. Here's a journaling card, again with another tree stamp, a quote, and a little cutout of this raven. By the way, here's another mandala that I forgot to show you. This is part of the hand-drawn images, of course. In this pocket, we have another one of my tree stamps with a funky background. And here's again that same bird stamp in a different environment with a stenciled background and a quote and these leaves that I received in Happy Mail. Here's another page with one of my tree stamp. On this one, you can see it's a lot darker than the others because I stamped it using black acrylic ink. In the back, you see a jelly print, a quote, and a kitchen towel that I used to mop up some vintage photo distress oxide, which turned into these beautiful golden yellows. And finally, some more examples in my Urban Nature junk journal. Again, we have the tree stamp. Here, it's stamped over 2 pages, and here it's stamped again. So that's a fun element maybe you want to consider adding. And here is a hole through which we can see the tree. Here is another tree image. This time I had cut this out. I think we will see that on a page further back. And I used this cut out image from the stamp and painted it gold and then glued it onto this page. Here's another one of those hand-carved stamps on a book page with some watercolor in the background. And again, this one is stamped with black acrylic ink. This is a raven that I've also hand-carved. These are all made with foam stamps. So again, check that video if you want to see how I made those. And I just tore around him and added him onto this pocket and added a bead for his eye. Some people think that's very creepy. Greetings, Louisa. Again, we have the raven. This time he's on a top-loading tuck spot. So they look different on each element you add them to. And also this one is a hand-carved stamp. This one is made from linoleum. I just love how versatile they are. In this collage, we again have one of the stamps, but this time I used the sheet that I had this, where is it? This one here on. So I painted this golden tree on this sheet, and so that left this silhouette, which I then added to this collage. And this here is the page where I cut out the stamped tree image. So there's lots of things you can do with a stamp, not just stamp it. On this page, there's another cute collage with another hand-carved bird stamp. This is the one that was also on the cheesecloth that I showed you before. Again, here's one of my bird stamps, this time on a pocket. Again, my tree stamp. Here's a leaf stamp. This didn't come out very well, but it doesn't matter. I still like it. And another tuck spot. This one has 3 spots to add something to, and I added some metal gears to that. Love how spooky it looks. Reminds me very much of Halloween. So all these things were ephemera that Louisa and I made, or actually that I made in the collaboration videos with Louisa. So if you've never watched that whole Defemember series from last December because you thought it was Christmassy themed, here you see it has nothing to do with Christmas. It was just aired in December, that's why. Let's stay in this junk journal for the first examples of favorite low-cost or no-cost supplies number 3, which is stitches, which includes machine stitching, hand stitching, as well as faux stitching. I think real stitching adds another layer of beautiful texture and interest, and I always think it's fun to have the threads sticking out. It's just another fun element. So we've already seen this here, so I just sewed around in circles. If you have a sewing machine that can do free motion stitching, then congratulations, you will have it very easy. I don't have that, so to do these 2 circles was really, really challenging, but I managed, so I'm super happy. Obviously, stitching pockets or tuck spots is always fun. Here I added some stitching onto a collage just on the side here with a wonky running stitch that is crossing on several parts of the stitching, just for fun, just for another collage element. Here I have some zigzag stitching just around the image for another element. Here we have this double wonky running stitch again. This time I used it to attach some ephemera as a flip out. Here is some machine stitching on some fabric that I added over this signature here, just for another element with some extra texture on the signature. Again, just some stitching as a collage element, just going around these 2 scraps of paper. Here's some hand stitching on my top loading tuck spot. This is stitched onto some fabric that I took off of a vintage book. And here's another book page element just from the spine. Those are also really fun elements to add to your journals. In this little journal, we have some more examples of some hand stitching. So here's a tree image stitched by hand into a dyed fabric. Looks really cute from both sides. Same concept here with a leaf. Very, very simple, but I think they are super cute. Here we have some on the top. You can hardly see this, but there is some, I forgot the name now, this sheer fabric. Here again, we have the hand stitching for this flip up with the cheesecloth. There are plenty of examples in this little journal. First of all, I just love all the threads hanging out here. Those were super important for me to feel motivated. Then we have the wonky double running stitch around our cover. We have hand stitching here with just some X's, some neon thread. Here we see the other side. We have it here around this digital bird image. We see it on the back as well. We see it around some of my pages. Here I hand stitched the body of this moth as well as the antennae. And on the back side where we saw the stitching, I added some butterfly wings. I also hand stitched this 49. Yes, the 9 is flipped. And of course, as we saw before, we have it here on the tree. And on top here, we have this little happy sun, which works from both sides. This vintage postcard already had a punched hole in it, so I decided to just stitch the sun around by just poking holes in 2 different sizes in circles and then just stitching into those holes, always from the middle. That's something I definitely want to do again. In my planner, I have some more hand-stitched X's up here. in this little cluster. And in Not Just Journal, I have a few pockets that I hand stitched on the bottom, on the top and the bottom, like my little fish pocket here. I also hand stitched this little booklet onto this page. Machine stitching is also really fun to add in little collages by just having some strips of scraps and then running those through your sewing machine so that you just have these little strips as extra collage elements to add to any collage. Here's another example of one of those scraps that I had on hand. Here's another hand-stitched pocket. For this one, I just folded this one sheet of paper over so that it forms a flap, and then I just stitched it closed. So this way we have one pocket from this side and we have one pocket from this side, which I think is super fun. On this page, I hand sewed this tuck spot on this page. That was obviously a fall themed page with some dried leaves where I just tied 3 leaves together and I think I sewed it right through the paper. Favorite low cost or no cost junk journal supplies number 4 is scraps and or collage fodder. I think I have hundreds of examples of these in my journal, so let me just show you a few. This here is part of a snippet roll which I made into a pocket. This has lots of vintage scraps and even some lace scraps on top. One of my favorite decorations ever. Works with just about any page. Here's another example of the same thing. This is a more narrow snippet roll. There's some sewing on top. These are all scraps and I just added a scrap of lace on the top again. I stenciled a feather here. These little collages are made mostly out of scraps. Yeah, there's a stamp here. There's a washi tape in the back, but there's always so many scraps in these little collages. Those are really always my most favorite elements. This flower is also made in one of my Junk Journal Snacks videos. There's some cheesecloth, there's some baking paper. This is a hand-cut flower, so no die cuts or anything used. This is a net from some lemons from my supermarket. So all things that are easily accessible. These 2 backgrounds are made with jelly plates, so that is part of collage fodder, which is great to have on hand. This little tag in my planner is also made almost completely out of scraps. This little number is a number from my bank statement. So instead of shredding all of those, I cut out a few elements because nobody will know from this what this is, but it's just a fun element to add to your collage. I love adding little scraps behind images. This is partly wallpaper. There's a scrapbook paper and there's a printed paper. Another fun way to add your scraps and or collage fodder is to make fun tabs out of them. Again, this is one of the things I did in Defemember, and I have these on various pages in my Urban Junk Journal. So all I did was tear up some of the scraps I had and glued and or sewed them together, added some stamping on top and some blim. I also combined them with fabric. And then you just add them so that they stick out of the page so that you can also see them from the other side of the page. This one is made out of magazine scraps. So that's another great source, magazines. And these gold foil pieces here are from chocolate. That's another great source. If you want either silver or gold foil, perfect scrap. Here's an example of some lace scraps. This is a handmade button, which is just tied on there with the lace scraps onto the document. On this page, I made a belly band with a pocket. This has a little journaling card with some writing space on the back. And this piece here was from a junk mail envelope, and I just covered it up again using magazine pages. Again, added some gold foiling and a little bit of gold splattering. Here's another example of what you can do with your fabric scraps. I just sewed some together and added them to a paper clip that I can clip to any page. Favorite junk journal supplies number 5 is writing or numbers, either as quote or as handwriting or as stamping. One example is here again on our belly band. So this one is from a magazine. It might have been a Daphne's Diary. That's a great place to look for writing to add to your journals. Another source for writing might be some stenciling, like here. This is from a Tim Holtz stencil, where I stenciled through with some acrylic paint. Here we have the next element. This is from a vintage Chinese book page. Beautiful collage element. This here was from a vintage book. This was the name of this mushroom. And on the back we have some more stenciling. Again, this is from a Tim Holtz stencil. We can use text as part of our backgrounds. It's fun to have it in different languages if you have the chance. There's also some writing here. This is a Tim Holtz paper pad. Going back to this paper clip, you can use it as a focal point as well, like I did with these labels. You can add faux writing as a design element for your pages, like I did here. If you have a typewriter, you could also add some words with that. Here's some letter stamping. This is a Tim Holtz stamp. Here's another example of the faux handwriting. I think it adds a really interesting element. Here's another example of that. Obviously, we can add words. We can add someone else's handwriting. This is another example of adding a book page in a foreign language as a design element. I personally love the Chinese font, so whenever I can get my hands on that, I am very, very happy. We can even add a quote as a focal point on a page, like this here. Another beautiful example of some vintage Chinese handwriting as a design element in a collage. Of course, we can add our own handwriting in our journals to jot down our thoughts, which is super special to read through in a couple of years. We can add our handwritten notes to pockets, of course. If we practice, we can even add some nice calligraphy, like I did here. We can add writing to fun shapes, like here. It just makes it more interesting to read. We can add stamped letters to fun shapes like this one. I forgot what these are called, these wheels. You know what they are. For this page, I again added a quote as a focal point, which I printed on a transparent paper, and then we can lift it up to see the collage. Maybe you have a little label maker hidden somewhere in your stash that you've forgotten about, that you could use to very quickly write a few words and add them to your page. You can stamp words and add them as fun elements dangling from a tab on your page. You can cut out words. In this case, this was a cutout from a paper bag from a tourist shop in Egypt. So this is beautiful Arabic writing. Maybe you're lucky and you have some vintage letters or printables of vintage letters, which make an absolutely gorgeous element in your journal. This is one of my favorite pages ever and is one of the simplest pages. Only added these 3 butterflies, stitched right down the middle to hold them in place, and just glued on this beautiful vintage letter paper. So maybe next time when you see the next new shiny thing that's trendy for crafting, maybe you can first think about using the things that are easily accessible for you and that actually don't cost you hardly anything at all. Below this video, you can find a playlist with all of the other videos of all of the other creators in this collaboration. So let's go check them out together. Thank you so much, Meg, for inviting me. Love you guys. Mwah, mwah.